A broke nurse helped a man in rags, unaware he's a disguised millionaire, and show up to propose later. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was an ordinary evening at the hospital, where Sarah, a dedicated nurse working the graveyard shift, found herself preparing for another long night. The usual hum of fluorescent lights filled the air as she walked down the sterile, quiet hallway of Westbrook Medical Center. The smell of antiseptic lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of coffee from the break room. She had been working there for 2 years, a job that gave her little time for herself but plenty of experience in caring for people who needed it most. But tonight felt different. It was the first time she had been assigned to take care of a special patient, one who had been in a coma for months. A note had been left at the nurse's station. "Sarah, you've been assigned to Grant Carter's room tonight. Ensure he's well taken care of." The name hit her like a wave, though she couldn't place why. Grant Carter. She'd seen his name all over the news. The youngest billionaire in the city. A man whose wealth was the stuff of legends. But now, here he was, lying motionless in a private room, hooked up to an array of machines. He had been in a car accident, a horrific crash that had left him in a coma, and his family, though incredibly wealthy, rarely visited. As Sarah stepped into his room, she was struck by the stark contrast between the luxury of his private suite and the lifelessness of the man lying in the bed. Grant Carter, once a titan of industry, now reduced to nothing more than a body kept alive by machines. She adjusted the foredrip and gently wiped his brow, the cold cloth against his skin a reminder of how fragile life truly was. Her hands moved expertly as she hummed softly to herself. "You should see the cafeteria food, Grant. It's tragic, even for a billionaire like you," she said with a small chuckle, though she knew he couldn't hear her. There was no response, of course, but Sarah continued to talk to him as she worked. It was something she did for all of her patients. Sometimes it helped calm them. Sometimes it made her feel less alone in a job that often felt isolating. She adjusted his pillow, careful not to disturb his sleeping form, when she noticed something strange. A faint twitch of his finger. It was so small, she almost thought she imagined it. She leaned in closer, her breath catching in her throat. His fingers twitched again, just a fraction of an inch, but enough to make Sarah pause. Could he be waking up? She quickly reported the movement to Dr. Harris, the head of neurology, who seemed skeptical. "Are you sure, Sarah?" he asked. "He's been in a coma for months. It's probably just a muscle spasm." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling. Something told her that Grant was starting to respond. Over the next few days, she couldn't help but continue to watch for any signs that he might wake up. She spoke to him more often, telling him about her life, her dreams, and even about the difficult night shifts. And each time she did, the slightest hint of movement seemed to follow. His fingers would twitch, or his foot would shift ever so slightly. It was as if he was listening to her, hearing her voice in the depths of his unconscious state. Sarah couldn't explain it, but she believed that something miraculous was happening. She knew she had to keep caring for him, to give him the best chance to wake up. But she couldn't shake the nagging thought. What would happen when he did? Would he remember her? Would he even recognize her? She couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this story than just a simple hospital shift. Something was changing, and Sarah felt like she was at the center of it. Sarah spent the next few days in a daze, the faint movements from Grant's comatose form still echoing in her mind. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something was happening, something miraculous that was beyond her understanding. Each time she entered Grant's room, she spoke to him, telling him about her day, her struggles, and her hopes. It wasn't much, but it was something to hold on to. She would tell him about her latest shift, about the chaos of the hospital, and about the way the cafeteria food had managed to be even worse that day than usual. To her surprise, every time she spoke, she felt a slight shift in the air, a subtle connection she couldn't explain. His fingers twitched again, just enough for Sarah to notice. Was it her voice that made him move? Was he truly aware of her? The question swirled in her mind as she continued to care for him, providing the best care she could, despite the doubts that began to creep in. The hospital was buzzing with talk about the patient who had not shown any signs of life for so long. The nurses whispered about how the doctors were almost ready to declare him lost, his family indifferent to his condition. But Sarah wasn't ready to give up on him. She had seen these small changes, these tiny movements that seemed to defy the odds. She couldn't just walk away now. One evening, as Sarah walked into Grant's room, she was startled to see his eyes slightly open. It wasn't much, but for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. His eyes flickered in the dim light of the room, and for the first time in months, there was a spark of life behind them. Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly checked the monitors, her breath catching in her throat. His heart rate had increased slightly, just enough to show that something was happening. She rushed to his side, gently holding his hand. "Grant," she whispered, her voice soft but full of hope. He didn't respond at first, but his grip tightened ever so slightly, just enough to send a rush of warmth through Sarah. She could hardly believe what was happening. Could he really be waking up? She called for Dr. Harris immediately, her voice trembling with excitement. Dr. Harris arrived, his skepticism clear as he checked Grant's vitals. "It's too soon to say for sure," he said, his tone dismissive. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening. Grant had started to show signs of life, and she was determined to help him through this. The following days were a whirlwind of hope and uncertainty. Grant's condition slowly improved. He started to show more subtle signs of awareness, his eyes following movements around the room, his breathing becoming more steady. Sarah found herself spending more and more time in his room, talking to him, reading to him, and simply being there for him. She knew it was risky, that she could be getting too attached, but she couldn't help it. There was something about him, something beyond his wealth and status, that pulled her in. The hospital staff began to notice the changes too. Dr. Harris still wasn't convinced, but the nurses were starting to look at Sarah with a new respect. They saw how hard she was working, how much she cared for Grant, and how determined she was to make sure he recovered. But with each passing day, Sarah grew more conflicted. She couldn't ignore the fact that Grant was, in essence, a stranger to her. He was the CEO of one of the wealthiest companies in the city, a man who had everything: power, influence, money. And yet here he was, lying in a hospital bed, at her mercy. She couldn't stop thinking about his life, his wealth, and what he might be like once he woke up. Would he even remember her? Would he acknowledge her for the role she had played in his recovery? Or would he see her as just another hospital employee, someone who was there to do her job and nothing more? One evening, as she was sitting by his bed, watching him sleep, she was startled when Grant's eyes fluttered open again. This time, it wasn't just a flicker. His gaze was clearer, more focused. He looked at Sarah, his expression unreadable. "Where am I?" he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she looked down at him. "You're in the hospital," she replied softly, her voice shaking. "You've been in a coma for a while, but you're waking up now. I'm Sarah. I've been your nurse." Grant's brow furrowed slightly as he processed her words. "A nurse?" he muttered, confusion evident in his voice. He tried to sit up, but Sarah quickly helped him, adjusting his pillows to make him more comfortable. "You've been through a lot," she said gently. "It's going to take time for you to fully recover, but you're getting better." Grant looked at her for a long moment, his gaze intense. He seemed to be taking in her every word, every movement, as if trying to piece together the fragments of his past. He had no memory of his life before the accident, but somehow, in this moment, Sarah felt like she was part of it. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that things could get better, that Grant's recovery wasn't just a dream. The days that followed were filled with small victories. Grant's memories started to come back in pieces. He remembered fragments of his life before the accident, his family, his company, and even some of his past relationships. But there was something else he remembered, something that surprised Sarah. "I remember you," he said one day, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've been here with me the whole time, talking to me, taking care of me. You've been so kind." Sarah was taken aback. She hadn't expected him to remember her, not like this. "Of course," she said softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I'm just doing my job." But deep down, Sarah knew it was more than that. She had formed a bond with him, one that she couldn't explain. And as much as she tried to push it away, she couldn't deny the growing feelings she had for the man who had once been a stranger, a man she had cared for without knowing who he really was. Sarah had always believed in the power of kindness, in the idea that even small gestures could change lives. But as Grant began to wake up, as he started to remember the life he had left behind, she began to wonder just how much of an impact her kindness had truly made. And would it be enough to change the course of both their lives forever? "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had been awake for so long," Sarah murmured, still in disbelief. She had spent so many hours at Grant's side, talking to him, encouraging him to wake up, but now that he was finally responsive, it was overwhelming. Grant's eyes, though still clouded with confusion, looked at her with more focus than ever before. The connection between them was undeniable. He was no longer the cold, distant millionaire from the headlines. He was someone who had begun to rely on her, someone who had started to care. He tried to sit up in the bed, his body still weak from months of lying still. "I don't remember much, but I remember you," Grant said, his voice hoarse but sincere. Sarah smiled gently. "It's okay. You don't need to remember everything right away." She adjusted his pillows, making him more comfortable as he settled back against the headboard. "You've been through a lot. You're doing great." The hospital room, which had once felt so sterile and isolating, now felt warmer, more alive with the promise of recovery. Sarah could see the effort in his eyes as he tried to piece together the fragments of his past. "You've been here for me," he said after a long silence, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know why, but you've always been here, talking to me." Sarah nodded, her eyes softening. "That's what I do," she said. "It's my job to care for you." "No," Grant corrected, shaking his head slightly. "It's more than that. You've been the only constant in this place. Everyone else, they just go through the motions, but you—" His voice trailed off as if the words were too much to say aloud. Sarah didn't know how to respond. She had always prided herself on her work ethic, her dedication to her patients, but hearing Grant's words made her feel seen in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the care she was providing. It was something deeper, something she couldn't quite put into words. She quickly changed the subject, wanting to distract him from the vulnerable moment. "How are you feeling? Are you in pain?" Grant hesitated before answering, as though trying to assess his own body. "I'm sore," he said, his brow furrowing slightly. "But it's not as bad as I thought it would be." Sarah smiled, relieved that he wasn't in any immediate discomfort. She continued to check his vitals and adjust his medications, all the while feeling a sense of responsibility toward him that she hadn't felt before. It was strange to think that she had started this journey with Grant as a stranger, someone she had only read about in the news, but now he was someone she couldn't imagine her days without. Over the next few days, Grant's recovery continued to progress. He was able to sit up on his own, move his arms, and even walk with assistance, though he was still weak. Sarah spent as much time with him as she could, guiding him through the physical therapy sessions, chatting with him about his life, and even telling him stories about her own. Slowly, she learned more about the man who had once been untouchable. Grant told her about his childhood, his rise to success, and the pressure of being constantly in the public eye. But it wasn't just the glamorous life that had shaped him. It was also the deep isolation he had felt. "I had everything I could ever want," Grant confessed one evening as Sarah helped him adjust his position in bed. "But I didn't have anyone to share it with. I was always surrounded by people who wanted something from me. I didn't know who to trust, who cared about me for who I really was." Sarah listened intently, her heart aching for him. She understood more than he knew. Her life had been very different, filled with its own set of challenges, but the loneliness that came with their respective lives was something she could relate to. "It sounds lonely," Sarah said quietly. "It was," Grant agreed, his voice tinged with regret. "But I never knew it could be different, until now." His words caught Sarah off guard. She hadn't expected him to open up like this, especially not to her. But in that moment, it felt like he was acknowledging something that neither of them had been willing to face before. There was a bond between them now, a connection that went beyond the typical patient-nurse relationship. Grant's recovery became more than just physical healing. It was emotional too. As he regained his strength, he began to ask Sarah about her life. "What about you?" he asked one evening as they sat together, watching the sunset from his hospital room. "What's your story?" Sarah hesitated. She wasn't used to talking about herself. She had spent so many years focusing on others, on her patients, that she had never really taken the time to think about her own story. But with Grant, it felt different. I grew up in a small town, she began, her voice soft but steady. My mom was a nurse, just like me. She taught me everything I know about caring for people, about putting others first. But it wasn't always easy. We didn't have much money. I had to work part-time jobs throughout college to pay for my tuition, and sometimes I didn't know how we were going to make ends meet. She paused, her gaze drifting to the window. But I always knew that being a nurse was what I wanted to do. It wasn't about the money or the recognition. It was about helping people, making a difference in their lives. Grant listened intently, his eyes studying her as she spoke. It sounds like you've always known what you wanted, he said thoughtfully. I've spent my whole life trying to get to the top, but it never felt like enough. I don't know if I ever knew what I wanted until now. Sarah smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She hadn't expected to find someone who understood her in the way Grant did. They were two people from completely different worlds, yet they shared something that was becoming undeniable, a growing connection. As the days passed, Sarah's feelings for Grant only deepened. She couldn't help but feel a pull toward him, a sense of warmth and comfort that she had never experienced with anyone else. But she was also aware of the danger in allowing herself to get too close. He was a patient, and she was his nurse. There were boundaries that couldn't be crossed, no matter how strong the feelings between them grew. But as Grant's recovery continued, Sarah found it harder and harder to ignore the way he made her feel. She had always kept her emotions in check, but with him, everything seemed different. I'm sorry, Sarah, Grant said softly, his voice low and sincere. I didn't mean to put you in a position where you had to choose between your job and your feelings. Sarah looked at him, her heart racing. She had been avoiding the growing attraction between them, trying to keep things professional, but it had become increasingly difficult. Grant had started to open up to her in ways that were beyond patient and nurse. They had shared personal stories, and with each passing day, her feelings for him grew stronger. But she had to keep reminding herself, he was still her patient, and she was still his nurse. You don't need to apologize, Sarah replied. Her voice steady, but with an undercurrent of emotion. This isn't about that. It's about you, getting better, and me doing my job. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just about that anymore. It was about something deeper, something she couldn't ignore. Over the past week, Grant's recovery had taken a remarkable turn. His physical therapy was going well, and he was gaining strength every day. His memory was also returning in pieces, and he had started to ask more questions about his life before the accident. He wanted to know about his family, his company, and his friends. But there was something else he wanted to know, something he kept bringing up, despite Sarah's attempts to steer the conversation elsewhere. What about you? Grant asked one evening, as Sarah helped him with a set of exercises. What's your life like outside of the hospital? What do you do when you're not here? Sarah froze for a moment. She had always been focused on her work, never really taking the time to think about her own life. But Grant's question lingered in her mind. She hadn't realized how much she had been living for others until now. I guess I don't really have much of a life outside of this, she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. I've always worked so much. There's not much time for anything else. Grant raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound like much of a life at all. Sarah smiled softly, shrugging her shoulders. It's not glamorous, but it's what I do. I help people. I know, Grant said, his tone serious. But there's more to life than just helping others, right? You deserve to have your own happiness too. His words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so many years putting everyone else first, never really taking time for herself. But now, hearing those words from Grant, it felt like a wake-up call. He was right. She deserved happiness too. As the days went on, Sarah found herself spending more time reflecting on her life. She had always been the one to take care of others, but had she ever really taken care of herself? She was so focused on doing her job while that she had neglected her own needs, her own desires. Grant had been a catalyst for her self-reflection, and she didn't know what to make of it. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional conversation with Grant, Sarah found herself standing by the window in his room, looking out at the city skyline. It had been a long time since she had stopped to just breathe, to appreciate the life around her. She realized how much she had missed out on by being so focused on her work. As she stood there, lost in thought, the door opened behind her, and Grant's voice broke through the silence. Sarah, can we talk? She turned around, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the sincerity in his eyes. There was something different about the way he was looking at her now, something more than just a patient's gratitude. Of course, she said, walking back toward him. What's on your mind? Grant looked at her for a moment, his expression serious but warm. I know I've been a lot to handle lately, he began, his voice steady but with a hint of vulnerability. But I want you to know something. I don't just see you as my nurse anymore. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to make sense of what he was saying. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Grant, she began. But he cut her off, his voice firm yet gentle. No, listen. You've been more than just a nurse to me. You've been my lifeline. You've been the one constant through all of this. You've been there for me when no one else was. He paused, his eyes meeting hers. And I don't think I can let that go. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know how to respond. She had spent so much time trying to keep things professional, trying to keep her feelings in check, but now that Grant had laid his heart on the line, she wasn't sure what to do. Grant, this isn't, she started, but her words faltered as he reached out to take her hand. I know it's complicated, he said softly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. I know I'm your patient, and I know we're not supposed to get involved like this. But I can't ignore how I feel about you. You've done more for me than anyone else ever has. Sarah felt her heart pounding in her chest as she looked at him. She knew the risks, knew that this could complicate everything. But in that moment, all she could think about was how much she had come to care for him, how much she had grown to love him. Grant, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. I don't know what to say. He smiled softly, squeezing her hand. You don't have to say anything, Sarah. I just needed you to know. I needed you to know that you mean something to me. More than you know. The weight of his words hung in the air, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have something more than just a nurse and a patient. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that in this moment, they had a connection that was undeniable. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope for more. I'm not sure how to handle this, Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly as she stood beside Grant's hospital bed. The weight of his confession still hung in the air, and she could feel the tension in her chest, unsure of how to navigate this newfound intimacy between them. Grant looked at her with understanding, his gaze steady. I know this isn't easy, Sarah, he said softly. I know we're not supposed to feel this way, but I can't pretend I don't. Sarah looked away, her heart racing. She had spent so many years keeping her emotions in check, putting her patient's needs above everything else, but now, in the face of Grant's honesty, she felt a vulnerability she hadn't experienced before. This is so complicated, she whispered. You're my patient. I'm your nurse. I shouldn't be feeling like this. But you do, Grant said gently, taking her hand in his. And I think you've been feeling it for a while now. We've both been through so much, and maybe we deserve a chance to see where this goes. Sarah looked at him, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to pull away, to keep things professional, to remind herself of the lines that couldn't be crossed. But another part of her, the part that had started to care for him in ways that were hard to ignore, wanted to give in, wanted to explore what this connection could be. She squeezed his hand, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. I've never been in a situation like this before, she said quietly. I don't know what to do. Grant smiled softly, his eyes warm and patient. We take it one step at a time, Sarah. Let's not rush it. We both need time to figure this out. Over the next few days, things between Sarah and Grant shifted, though they were careful to maintain the boundaries they had set. Sarah continued to care for him as his nurse, but now there was something more between them, an unspoken understanding that, while they couldn't cross certain lines, they also couldn't ignore the growing connection they shared. They spent hours talking, getting to know each other in ways they hadn't before. Grant shared more stories about his life before the accident, his rise to success, the friends and family he had lost along the way, and the loneliness that had accompanied his wealth. I never realized how much I needed someone like you in my life, Sarah, Grant admitted one evening as they sat together in his room, the city skyline visible through the window. I always thought I could do it on my own. But now that you're here, I realize I've been missing something. Sarah felt her heart swell with emotion. I never expected to be in this situation, she said softly. But I'm glad you're here, Grant. I'm glad you're waking up. She hesitated, unsure if she should say what was on her mind, but the words came out before she could stop them. You've made me rethink a lot of things about my life. I've always put my work first. I've never really stopped to think about what I want, about what makes me happy. Grant's gaze softened, and he reached out to gently touch her hand. Maybe you should, he said. You deserve to be happy, Sarah. You've been so focused on taking care of others that you haven't taken time for yourself. You deserve someone who sees you for who you really are, not just for what you do. Sarah swallowed hard, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've always kept my feelings in check. I don't know how to let go. You don't have to do it all at once, Grant reassured her. I'm not going anywhere. We'll take it slow together. But I want you to know that I care about you, Sarah. More than I ever thought I could care for anyone. Sarah looked at him, her heart aching with the vulnerability in his words. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that they could have something real, but the fear of complicating things kept her on edge. She had always been the strong one, the one who kept everything under control, but with Grant, it was different. She felt as if her carefully constructed walls were starting to crumble. Days turned into weeks, and Grant continued to make progress. He regained more strength, started to walk on his own, and his memories continued to return. But as his recovery progressed, so did the tension between them. Every look, every touch, every conversation felt charged with something more than just friendship or professional care. Sarah tried to push the feelings aside, but they only grew stronger. One afternoon, as she helped him adjust in his bed, their faces were close, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick with unspoken emotions. Grant's eyes were soft, but there was a hint of something deeper in them. Sarah's breath caught as he leaned in slightly, his lips hovering just inches from hers. It was a moment suspended in time, a moment where everything else seemed to fade away. She could feel the heat of his breath on her skin, and for a brief second, she almost let herself believe that they could have something real. But then the moment passed. Grant pulled back, and the tension between them was palpable. I can't do this, Grant, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. We can't do this. It's too complicated. Grant looked at her, his expression a mix of understanding and frustration. I know it's complicated, Sarah, but I can't deny what I feel for you. And I don't think you can either. Sarah shook her head, her heart pounding. I don't know what to do, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I can't cross this line. Grant reached out and gently cupped her cheek, his touch warm and reassuring. We don't have to cross it right away, he said softly. But we can't pretend it's not there. We'll figure it out. Together. As Sarah looked into his eyes, she realized that she had reached a crossroads. She couldn't keep denying the feelings that had blossomed between them. She couldn't keep pretending that she was immune to the man who had come into her life, who had made her feel things she had never felt before. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of something more. Something that was just for her. Something that was real. I'm still here, Sarah said softly as she stood by Grant's bedside, her gaze never leaving him. The days had stretched on, and with each one, their connection deepened, as did the tension between them. Grant had slowly regained his strength and most of his memories, but with every passing day, he had become more open with Sarah about his feelings. And though she had spent years building walls around her heart, she couldn't deny that she was beginning to let those walls crumble, piece by piece. There was a part of her that wanted to resist, that wanted to keep things professional and detached. She had seen the complications that relationships brought, especially in a setting like this. But then there was the undeniable pull she felt toward him. This man who had entered her life under the strangest of circumstances and turned it upside down. I don't know what to do anymore, Sarah whispered, her voice shaky with uncertainty. Grant's eyes softened as he looked at her. He had always been careful not to push her too hard, respecting her space. But now, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, he knew he had to say something. You don't have to decide anything right now, Sarah, he said quietly. I'm not asking you to jump into anything. But I can't pretend that I don't feel something real for you. And I think you feel it too. His words hung in the air, and Sarah swallowed hard. She wanted to deny it, wanted to keep pretending that she could just focus on her job and nothing more. But deep down, she knew the truth. Every time they talked, every time they shared a moment of silence together, it became harder and harder to ignore the bond that was growing between them. She nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. I feel it too, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. But it's so complicated. You're still my patient, and I'm your nurse. Grant smiled, a small but reassuring smile. I know, and I respect that. I'm not trying to rush anything, but I want you to know that I care about you. And I think we both deserve a chance at something more, outside of these hospital walls. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so much of her life giving to others, never really thinking about her own needs or desires. But now, with Grant in front of her, she felt a longing she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She wanted to believe in something more. She wanted to believe that she could have it all, the career she loved, and a love that was real. But fear held her back. The fear of what would happen if they crossed that line, if things went wrong. I don't know if I can take that step, Sarah said, her voice breaking with emotion. I've never allowed myself to even think about my own happiness, and now you're asking me to consider something so different. Grant reached out and gently took her hand in his. You don't have to have all the answers right now, he said softly. We can take this slow. We can go at your pace. But I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Sarah looked at him, her heart racing. She had never imagined that she would find herself in this position, torn between her duty and her heart. But looking at Grant, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, she knew that this wasn't something she could ignore anymore. She had spent so many years putting herself last, but for the first time, she realized that maybe, just maybe, it was time to consider what she wanted. I don't know what will happen, Sarah said, her voice trembling. But I think I need to find out. Grant's face lit up with a smile, his eyes filled with warmth and relief. We'll figure it out, Sarah. I promise. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, but also with hope. Sarah continued to care for Grant, but now there was a sense of closeness between them that hadn't been there before. They shared more than just casual conversations. They shared their hopes, their dreams, and their fears. And as they did, Sarah began to open up in ways she hadn't allowed herself to before. It wasn't just about him being her patient anymore. It was about them as two people who had found something real in each other. But even as Sarah started to embrace this new connection, a part of her remained cautious. The hospital was still a place of professionalism, and the power dynamics were still there. It wasn't easy to navigate these complicated emotions, but with Grant by her side, she felt like she could face it. One evening, after a long day of physical therapy, Sarah sat with Grant in his room, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The room was quiet, the only sounds the soft hum of the machines around them and the distant noise of the city outside. Grant turned to her, his eyes soft with affection. I've been thinking, he began, his voice hesitant. I want to take you out when you're ready. I want to show you that what we're building, can be more than just hospital visits and recovery. We deserve something real, something outside of this. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat at his words. You mean a date? She asked, surprised by how the simple question made her feel. Yeah, Grant said with a shy smile. A real date. Just the two of us. No more lines to cross, no more barriers. Just us. Sarah looked at him, her heart full of emotion. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she wasn't just the nurse, where she wasn't just taking care of others. A life where she was allowed to be loved, to be happy. And maybe, just maybe, she could have that with Grant. I think I'd like that, she said softly, her voice full of hope. As they sat together in the fading light, Sarah realized that this was the beginning of something new, a new chapter in her life. One where she could be more than just a caregiver, and where love, though complicated, had a chance to grow. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was willing to find out. I'm not sure about this, Sarah said, her voice laced with hesitation as she looked at Grant across the dinner table. They were sitting in a cozy, dimly lit restaurant, just the two of them. It was their first real date since he had woken up, and even though she had agreed to give it a try, there was still a nagging sense of uncertainty in her chest. It wasn't that she didn't enjoy being with him, she did. In fact, it felt natural. But the fear of crossing professional boundaries, of letting her heart get in the way of her work, was hard to shake. Grant noticed the way she shifted uncomfortably in her seat and reached out to gently touch her hand. It's okay, Sarah, he said softly, his eyes warm and understanding. We don't have to rush anything. We can take it slow, one step at a time. Sarah looked at him, the sincerity in his voice making her heart race. He had been patient with her, never pushing, always giving her the space she needed. But there was something about tonight. Something about the way he made her feel like she could be more than just a nurse, more than just someone who gave to others without ever taking anything for herself. I just don't want to make a mistake, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I've never been in a situation like this before. I don't know how to separate my feelings from my work. Grant smiled, his thumb lightly stroking her hand as if reassuring her. You don't have to separate them, Sarah. This isn't about your work or your duty. It's about us. It's about finding something real together, outside of this hospital, outside of all the complications. Sarah felt a knot form in her throat. It was difficult to ignore how much she wanted to believe him, to let herself believe that something real could grow between them. The man sitting across from her had been nothing short of amazing, not just in how he had treated her, but in how he had fought to recover, how he had faced everything head-on. His resilience was inspiring. But even more than that, he had become her anchor, the one person who made her feel like she mattered. She looked down at their intertwined hands, her mind racing with thoughts of what their future might hold. I'm scared, she confessed. I'm scared that if this doesn't work out, I'll lose everything. My job, my stability, my sense of control. Grant squeezed her hand gently, his eyes never leaving hers. You don't have to lose anything, Sarah. If this doesn't work out, we'll figure it out together. But I believe in us. I believe that what we have is worth it. Sarah nodded, though her heart was still full of doubt. She had spent so many years burying her own desires, focusing solely on her career, and now that she was faced with the possibility of something more, it was overwhelming. They continued their dinner in silence for a few moments, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. It wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was just a pause, a space to let things settle. As the meal came to an end, Grant paid the bill, and they left the restaurant together, walking through the cool evening air. The city around them was alive with the hum of late-night activity, but the world seemed to slow down for just a moment, as if it, too, was waiting to see what would happen next. Do you want to take a walk? Grant asked, his voice casual but filled with meaning. I know a quiet spot by the river. We can just talk. Sarah agreed, feeling the pull of something new, something exciting, but still unfamiliar. As they walked side by side, the noise of the city faded, replaced by the soft sound of their footsteps. The river shimmered in the moonlight, the gentle flow of the water adding to the peaceful atmosphere. I've been thinking a lot about my life, about how I've always been so focused on my career and taking care of others, Sarah said after a while, breaking the comfortable silence. But now, with you, I feel like maybe I'm allowed to want something more. I just don't know how to reconcile that with everything I've built. Grant stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious yet filled with warmth. Sarah, you're allowed to want happiness. You're allowed to have a life outside of work. You've given so much of yourself to others, but that doesn't mean you have to keep sacrificing your own joy. She met his gaze, her chest tightening with emotion. It felt like every word he said was a small weight lifted from her shoulders. You really believe that? She asked, her voice soft with vulnerability. I do, he said without hesitation. You deserve everything, Sarah. You deserve to live a life that's yours. One where you get to take care of yourself, to be happy, to be loved. The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time, Sarah felt a sense of peace, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she could let go of her fears and embrace something more. As they stood there by the river, the world around them quiet, Sarah realized that the life she had always known, the life of constant work and sacrifice, didn't have to be her only option. She could have more. She could have love. And with Grant, she could finally allow herself to take that step. I'm ready, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm ready to take that step with you. Grant smiled, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and joy. I'm glad, he said softly, pulling her into a gentle embrace. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Sarah felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just about Grant or about their future together. It was about her, about finally choosing herself, about allowing herself the happiness she deserved. And in that moment, with the city lights twinkling in the distance and the sound of the river flowing beside them, Sarah knew that no matter what the future held, they had a chance to make it work. Together. I'm glad you're here, Grant said, his voice low and sincere as they walked back to the hospital together, the weight of the evening still lingering between them. Sarah had agreed to give their connection a real chance, and the joy in her chest was almost overwhelming. For the first time in so long, she felt like she was choosing herself, not just her responsibilities. But with that choice came a new set of fears about what would happen next. "I'm glad to," Sarah replied, her voice soft but filled with emotion. She glanced at him, the man who had become so much more than just a patient. In the quiet of the night, with the lights of the city twinkling in the distance, she couldn't help but feel that this was the start of something beautiful. But as they approached the entrance to the hospital, Sarah's heart sank slightly. The weight of her dual role, both as his nurse and as someone who had become so important to him, pressed down on her. "Grant, there's something I need to talk to you about," Sarah said, her voice growing more serious. Grant looked at her, his brow furrowing in concern. "What's wrong?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she began, choosing her words carefully. "And I know we've been taking things slow, and that's good. But there's this other part of me, the part that's still a nurse, that's worried about what might happen if things go further between us." She looked down at the ground, unable to meet his eyes. The fear of crossing professional boundaries was a constant weight on her mind, even though she had allowed herself to open up to him. Grant stopped walking, gently cupping her chin and lifting her face so that their eyes met. "You're worried about what will happen if we get involved beyond just being patient and nurse?" he asked softly. She nodded, her chest tight with anxiety. "I know I can't let my personal feelings get in the way of my work, Grant. I've spent my entire career taking care of others. I've never had to navigate something like this." Grant's expression softened with understanding. "I get it, Sarah. I do. You're worried about the complications, the risks. And I know that I'm still your patient, and I respect that. But I don't want you to think that what we have, is just some fleeting thing. I don't want you to feel like it's something that could jeopardize everything you've worked for." Sarah's heart twisted in her chest. She had never allowed herself to consider the possibility of a relationship like this, and now, hearing his words, she realized how much more she feared losing him, not just as a patient, but as someone who had become so much more in her life. "You're not just my patient anymore," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're someone who has made me feel seen, Grant. You've made me feel like I matter outside of my work." Grant stepped closer to her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You do matter, Sarah," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "And I'm not going anywhere. No matter what happens between us, I'll always respect you and your career. I'll always be grateful for everything you've done for me." Sarah looked up at him, her heart swelling with affection. She had spent so long running from her own desires, always putting others first, but with Grant, it felt like she had finally found someone who understood her. She didn't have to choose between her career and love. They could find a balance. "I just don't know how to make it work," Sarah admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I want you, but I don't know how to navigate everything. I don't know if it's even possible to have both." Grant smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "You don't have to have all the answers, Sarah. We don't have to figure it all out right now. But we'll take it one day at a time. We'll make it work, together." Sarah's chest tightened with emotion. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could have a life together, outside of the hospital and the roles they had been trapped in. But the reality of their situation still hung over her, a reminder of how complicated things could become. "But what about your family?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "What about your company? What will they think if we keep this going?" Grant paused, taking a deep breath. "I can't control what anyone else thinks, Sarah, but I can control what I want. And what I want is to be with you. My family will understand. My company will understand. If we're being honest with ourselves, it's the only thing that really matters." Sarah felt a surge of relief flood through her. For the first time in a long time, she could imagine a future that wasn't clouded by fear. A future where she could have the love she had always dreamed of. "I think I'm ready to take that step," Sarah said, her voice steady now, her heart open. "I don't know what the future holds, but I want to try. With you." Grant's smile was pure joy, and he reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I'm glad," he said softly. "I promise I'll be right here, every step of the way." The air between them seemed to shift as they walked into the hospital together, hand in hand. For the first time, Sarah felt like she was moving forward, not just with Grant, but with herself. She had made The choice to embrace this relationship, to open herself up to the possibility of love, of happiness, and it felt like the beginning of something incredible. As they entered the building, the familiar sterile smell of the hospital didn't feel as cold anymore. Sarah didn't know what would happen next, but she knew she was ready to face whatever came, as long as Grant was by her side. "I think this is it," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and fear as she sat beside Grant in his private room. The weight of their relationship, everything that had developed between them, had built up to this point. It was no longer just about his recovery, no longer just about her role as his nurse. It was about them, about taking a leap together into a future that felt uncertain, but also full of possibility. Grant, now fully recovered and more confident than ever, turned to her with a warm, reassuring smile. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly, his eyes filled with the same uncertainty she felt. She took a deep breath, looking out the window at the city skyline. It had been weeks since they had crossed that line, weeks since she had finally let herself feel the things she had been so scared to admit. But now, with their bond growing stronger by the day, Sarah knew that it was time. "I'm thinking that I'm ready," she said, turning to face him. "Ready for whatever comes next. Ready to let go of all the fears, all the doubts, and just be with you." The words felt like a weight lifted off her chest. For so long, she had been holding back, afraid of what might happen if she let herself truly feel. But now, in the quiet of this moment, with Grant by her side, she knew it was time to stop being afraid. Grant reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You know we're not alone in this, right?" he said, his voice steady. "We're in this together. We've always been in this together, from the moment you started caring for me." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with affection. "I know, and that's why I'm not scared anymore. Because with you, I feel like I can handle anything." He leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from her face as he looked at her with deep affection. "We've been through so much, Sarah, and we've come out the other side stronger than before. I think we're ready for whatever comes next." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words. It wasn't just about the obstacles they had overcome in his recovery. It was about the obstacles they had overcome within themselves. They had both faced fears, insecurities, and doubts, but now they were standing together, ready to face the future as a team. The door to the room opened, and Dr. Harris entered, a friendly smile on his face as he walked over to check on Grant's progress. "Well, I have to say, I'm impressed with how well you're doing, Grant," Dr. Harris said, his tone professional but warm. "Your recovery has been nothing short of remarkable." "I owe it all to Sarah," Grant said with a smile, turning to Sarah. "She was there for me every step of the way. I wouldn't be here without her." Dr. Harris nodded, glancing at Sarah with an approving look. "You've been an incredible nurse, Sarah," he said, "and it's clear that your bond with Grant has made all the difference." Sarah felt a flush rise to her cheeks at the praise. She had always believed in doing her job to the best of her ability, but hearing it from Dr. Harris, someone she respected so much, meant more than she could express. "I just did my job," Sarah said, her voice soft but filled with pride. But it wasn't just about that. It was about being there for him when he needed it the most. Dr. Harris smiled. "Well, you certainly went above and beyond. It's not every day that a nurse becomes an essential part of a patient's recovery like that." Sarah's heart swelled with pride as she exchanged a look with Grant. She had never expected this. She had never expected to form such a deep connection with a patient, let alone fall in love with one. But here they were, standing side by side, stronger than they had ever been. As the conversation with Dr. Harris continued, Sarah felt a quiet confidence building inside her. She had always been a caregiver, always been the one to put others first. But now, with Grant, she had finally found someone who valued her for who she was. Someone who saw her, not just as a nurse, but as a woman capable of love and happiness. The thought of a future with him, of building a life outside of the hospital, filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness and new beginnings. Grant, now back to his old self, had become her equal partner in every sense. They spent their time together exploring the city, enjoying quiet evenings at home, and talking about their dreams for the future. As their relationship deepened, so did their understanding of each other. Sarah learned more about Grant's life before the accident, the pressures, the loneliness, the isolation that came with his wealth and success. And Grant learned about Sarah's struggles, her hopes, and her quiet determination to make a difference in the world. For the first time, they were able to be vulnerable with each other in a way that went beyond their initial connection as patient and nurse. They were two people who had found something real, something worth fighting for. But there were still challenges ahead. The question of their future, of how they would navigate their relationship outside of the hospital, remained a constant presence in the back of Sarah's mind. She knew that the world would judge them, that there would be people who would question their bond, who would see their connection as a complication, a conflict of interest. But for the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she was ready to face those challenges. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Grant by her side, and together, they could handle anything that came their way. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Grant's apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah turned to him with a sense of clarity she hadn't had before. "I'm not afraid anymore, Grant," she said softly, her voice steady. "I'm not afraid of what people might say. I'm not afraid of what comes next. Because as long as we're together, I know we can make it work." Grant smiled, his heart full. "I'm with you every step of the way, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "We've already been through the hardest part. The rest is just us, together." And in that moment, Sarah knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, because she had found love in the most unexpected place and with the most unexpected person. And together, they would build a future they both deserved. "I'm starting to think we're more alike than I ever imagined," Sarah said softly as she sat next to Grant in the cozy apartment he had moved into once he was fully recovered. The evening air was warm, and the sound of distant city traffic blended with the soft hum of their conversation. She had never imagined herself in a relationship like this, finding love, not just with a person, but with a life she had never considered before. She had always been so focused on helping others, never really thinking about her own desires. But now, with Grant by her side, she realized how much she had neglected herself, how much she had been missing. "You know, I think I used to believe that wealth and success would make everything easier," Grant said, his voice thoughtful as he leaned back against the cushions, his arm around her. "But the truth is, I spent so much time running away from what really mattered, from the people who actually cared about me, that I ended up feeling more alone than I've ever been. It wasn't until you came into my life that I realized I'd been missing out on what truly made life worth living." Sarah turned to look at him, her heart full of gratitude. "I used to think the same way," she admitted. "I thought if I just worked hard enough, did my job well enough, I'd be okay. But I forgot what it felt like to actually live, to be happy." Grant smiled at her, his hand resting on hers. "And now we're here," he said quietly. "You and me. Together." The weight of his words hit her, but it wasn't an overwhelming burden. It felt like a promise, a foundation to build on. It was like everything had finally clicked. They weren't just patient and nurse anymore. They were partners, working through the complexities of life, side by side. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes for a moment as she let herself enjoy the peace that settled around them. They had both been through so much, and yet, they had come out the other side, stronger and more connected than either of them had imagined possible. "I never thought I'd be here," Sarah said after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought I could have this kind of happiness. I was always so focused on other people, always putting them first. I didn't think there was room for anything else." Grant kissed her forehead gently, his voice soft. "You deserve all the happiness, Sarah. You've given so much to others. Now it's your time." She smiled, the warmth of his words wrapping around her like a blanket. "Maybe we both needed each other," she said, her heart full. "Maybe that's what makes this so special." Grant nodded, his hand gently squeezing hers. "Maybe we did. But I don't want to waste any more time thinking about what could have been. I want to focus on now, on us." As the days went on, Sarah and Grant found themselves settling into a rhythm, one that didn't revolve around the hospital or his recovery, but around them as a couple, figuring out how to navigate their new life together. They began to talk more about their future, about where they wanted to live, what kind of life they wanted to build, and how they could support each other through the ups and downs that lay ahead. One evening, as they sat down to dinner, Grant suddenly looked at Sarah, his expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, taking a deep breath. "About everything. About us. And I want you to know, I'm ready for the next step. I don't want to keep looking back anymore. I want to move forward. I want to build something with you, something lasting. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The vulnerability in his voice struck her deeply. It wasn't just about a relationship anymore. It was about the future. Their future. I'm ready too, she said, her voice firm and full of emotion. I don't want to wait either. Grant smiled, a spark of joy lighting up his eyes. I think we're ready to take the next step. Together. As they moved forward, Sarah and Grant both faced their fears and insecurities head-on. But this time, they weren't doing it alone. They were doing it together, learning how to balance their love and their individual lives. The challenges they faced were real, but so were the rewards. They built a foundation that wasn't based on their past, but on what they had now and what they hoped for in the future. In the weeks that followed, their bond deepened. They laughed, they cried, and they shared more moments than either of them ever thought possible. There were still moments of uncertainty, of course. Times when the world outside seemed ready to judge them, to question their relationship. But together, they found strength in each other. They realized that the opinions of others didn't matter as much as what they had built between them. And as their connection grew, so did their love. Sarah never imagined that she could have a life like this. A life where she wasn't just defined by her work, where she didn't have to put everyone else first. She could have a life of her own, one that was full of love and possibility. And she had Grant to thank for showing her that. He had taught her how to believe in herself, how to let go of the fear of losing everything, and how to embrace what truly mattered. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she had everything she had ever wanted: love, happiness, and a future that was wide open for the two of them to build together. And as they stood side by side, looking out at the future ahead, Sarah knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, stronger than ever. They were no longer just two people trying to figure out their place in the world. They were partners, ready to take on whatever life threw their way. I think it's time, Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet strength as she sat beside Grant in the living room of his apartment. The evening was still, with the city lights casting soft shadows on the walls. They had been through so much together, so many ups and downs, so many challenges. But now, sitting here with him, she felt a sense of peace that she hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't perfect, and they still had hurdles to overcome, but together, they had found something real. Grant, looking more relaxed than ever, turned to her with a smile that had become a constant in her life. I think you're right, he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. We've both come a long way, but I feel like we're ready. I feel like we can handle whatever comes next. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with affection for the man who had become her everything. She had never imagined that her life would take this turn, that she would go from being a nurse caring for a patient to being in a deep, loving relationship with him. But here they were, and she couldn't imagine life any other way. What do you think comes next? Sarah asked, her voice full of curiosity. I don't know, Grant admitted, his tone thoughtful. But I do know that I want to see where this goes. I want us to have a future, and I think we've got a solid foundation to build on. Sarah nodded, her thoughts drifting to all the things they had discussed over the past few months, about their hopes for the future, their plans, their dreams. They had talked about everything, from settling down in a new city to starting a life outside the hospital. But there was something Sarah hadn't shared yet, something that had been on her mind for days now. There's something I've been thinking about, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant's eyes softened with concern as he leaned in closer. What is it? He asked, his voice gentle. It's just, well, we've been so focused on building our relationship, and I've been thinking about my future too. I've always wanted to make a difference in the world, but I've never really taken the time to think about what that means for me outside of my job. Grant listened carefully, his gaze never leaving her. I get it, he said after a moment. You've spent so much time taking care of others, Sarah. You've given so much of yourself. But what do you want for yourself? What do you need? Sarah took a deep breath, her heart pounding slightly at the question. I think I need to figure out what makes me happy, Grant. Not just in this relationship, but in my life. I've always been so focused on other people, on doing the right thing, that I've neglected my own dreams. Maybe it's time for me to take a step back and think about where I want to go next. Grant reached out, gently taking her hand in his. Whatever you decide, Sarah, I'll be here with you. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. But I believe in you. I believe in everything you want to achieve, and I'll support you no matter what." His words filled her with warmth. She had always been so afraid of letting go, of allowing herself to dream without fear. But with Grant by her side, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known in years. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I don't think I've ever really allowed myself to dream for myself, but I think it's time to start." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation settling between them. Sarah felt like she had finally taken the first step towards something she had put off for far too long. It wasn't just about love or about her career. It was about Sarah, as a person, finding her own way in the world. And as she looked at Grant, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could have everything she had ever wanted: love, a career she was passionate about, and a future filled with possibilities. As the days passed, Sarah began to focus more on her own goals. She started researching ways she could make an impact outside of her work in the hospital, ways she could help those who needed it most. She began attending workshops, exploring volunteer opportunities, and reaching out to people in the community who shared her passions. But throughout it all, Grant was there, supporting her, encouraging her, and reminding her that she was capable of anything she set her mind to. They found balance in their relationship, and as Sarah pursued her own goals, she felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. One day, as they sat together on the balcony, looking out at the city, Grant turned to her with a question. "Have you thought about where you want to be in the next few years?" he asked, his voice curious but gentle. Sarah thought for a moment, her eyes focused on the horizon. "I think I want to be in a place where I can help people, where I can do more than just work in a hospital. I want to be able to give back in a meaningful way, to create something that will last." Grant nodded, a proud smile spreading across his face. "I think that's amazing," he said, "and I know you'll get there. You've got the heart for it. Whatever path you choose, I'm with you." His words settled in her heart like a quiet promise, and Sarah knew, in that moment, that she had found someone who truly believed in her. They weren't just building a future together. They were building a future that was filled with purpose, with passion, and with the kind of love that would carry them through anything. And as they sat there, side by side, Sarah felt a peace settle over her. She was ready for whatever came next, because for the first time, she knew that she didn't have to do it alone. She had Grant, and together, they could face anything. "I think we're ready," Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with a mix of anticipation and nervous excitement as she sat next to Grant on the couch, the warmth of their shared space enveloping them. It had been several months since they first crossed the line from patient and nurse to something more, and in that time, they had both grown, not just as individuals, but as partners. They had faced fears, fought doubts, and most importantly, built something strong together. But now, with their relationship solidifying, they were ready to take another big step forward. Grant, his gaze soft yet full of pride, turned toward her, his smile lighting up the room. "Ready for what?" he asked, his voice a perfect mix of curiosity and support. Sarah took a deep breath, her hands lightly resting on her lap as she looked down for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Ready for the future," she said quietly, her voice growing more confident. "I've been thinking about everything we've talked about where we're headed, about the life I want to build. And I think it's time. I think it's time for me to fully embrace it, to really start living for myself, not just for my job or anyone else." Grant's expression softened, his eyes locking with hers. "You've been living for others for so long, Sarah. You've given so much of yourself. It's time for you to live for you, whatever that means. And I'll be right here with you, every step of the way." His words, gentle and true, filled her with warmth. It was everything she needed to hear. She had always been the one to give, to take care of everyone else. But now, standing beside Grant, she could see that taking care of herself, pursuing her own dreams, wasn't a selfish act. It was a step toward true fulfillment. "I've been thinking about a change," she continued, her voice steady now. "A big change. Something that's all mine. I'm ready to take a leap in my career, to make a bigger impact, not just in the hospital, but in the world. I'm ready to start something new." Grant's eyes sparkled with excitement as he leaned in closer, his hand resting gently on hers. "I love hearing that. You've always had that drive in you. And I know you can do anything you set your mind to. What do you want to do?" Sarah's heart beat faster at his support. She had spent so long questioning her ability to achieve more, to step outside of the small, confined space she had put herself in. But now, with Grant's belief in her, she knew she could take the leap. "I want to open a community clinic," she said, the words flowing more easily than she expected. "A place where people can get the care they need, no matter their background, their financial situation. I want to make healthcare accessible for everyone, not just for the privileged few." Grant's eyes shone with pride. "That's amazing, Sarah," he said softly. "I know it's a big step, but if anyone can make it happen, it's you." His words filled her with confidence, pushing aside any lingering doubts. This was what she wanted, and it was time to stop holding herself back. Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into planning the clinic. She met with architects, connected with nonprofit organizations, and began the process of securing funding. Every day, she felt more energized and alive, driven by the dream she had once thought impossible. And through it all, Grant was by her side. He supported her in every decision, encouraged her through the tough moments, and celebrated every small victory along the way. But as the clinic began to take shape, Sarah realized that it wasn't just the career change she was excited about. It was the life she was building with Grant. She had always been afraid of opening up, of letting herself believe in love and happiness. But now, she was starting to see that she didn't have to choose between her dreams and love. She could have both. "I can't believe how much has changed," Sarah said one night as they sat on the balcony of their apartment, the city lights twinkling below them. "Not just with the clinic, but with us. With me. I've never felt this confident, this sure of myself before. And I know it's because of you. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Grant smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as he gazed at her with admiration. "You always had it in you, Sarah," he said softly. "I just helped you see it. You've done all the hard work, and I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of everything you've become." Sarah's heart swelled with love. She had always been the one to push herself, to work harder than anyone else. But with Grant, she realized she didn't have to do it alone. He was her partner, in every sense of the word. "I'm proud of us," she whispered, turning toward him. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Grant nodded, his smile widening. "We've been through so much. But we've built something strong. Something worth fighting for." Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had found the love she never thought she deserved, and now, she was finding the courage to live the life she had always dreamed of. "I'm ready to take on whatever comes next," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "And I know we'll do it together." Grant leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Together," he echoed, his voice filled with certainty. And in that moment, as they stood side by side, Sarah realized that everything she had worked for, everything she had been afraid of, had led her to this place. She had found love, she had found purpose, and now, she was ready to build a future that was all her own. A future where she could help others, make a real difference, and share her life with the man who had shown her how to believe in herself. With Grant by her side, Sarah knew that there was nothing they couldn't achieve. Together, they would take on the world. The clinic had opened its doors just a few weeks ago, and already, Sarah could feel the impact it was having. As patients walked through the doors of the newly established community healthcare center, Sarah felt a deep sense of purpose that she had never experienced before. Every morning, she arrived early, prepared to face the challenges of running a clinic, managing the staff, and continuing to care for the people who relied on them. But no matter how busy the days became, she knew that she was making a difference. She had built something tangible, something that went beyond her own personal journey. It was something that could change lives. As Sarah walked through the waiting area, greeting patients and checking in with her staff, she couldn't help but smile. This was it. This was what she had been working toward for so long. Behind her, she heard a familiar voice calling out to her. "Hey, Sarah." Sarah turned to find Grant standing at the entrance, a wide grin on his face. "I brought you coffee," he said, holding out a cup. Sarah laughed, feeling the weight of her exhaustion eased just a little. "You're a lifesaver," she said, taking the cup from him. "I can't believe how crazy it's been around here. But it's good crazy. You know what I mean." Grant nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I do. It's been amazing watching you build this from the ground up. But you're not doing it alone. You've got me here, and I'm proud of what you've created." Sarah smiled at him, feeling the warmth of his support. It wasn't just about the clinic. It wasn't just about her career. It was about everything they had built together, about their partnership, about the trust they had in one another, and the way they had navigated life's challenges together. It was about them. But as much as Sarah had found fulfillment in her work, she couldn't help but wonder how she could keep the balance. She had been so focused on her dreams, on helping others, on proving that she could make a difference in the world. But in the process, she had neglected something just as important, herself. Grant seemed to sense her shift in mood, and he stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You okay?" he asked. Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know. I just feel like there's so much to do, so many people to help, and sometimes it feels like I'm not giving enough of myself to the people I love." "To you." Grant's face softened with understanding, and he reached out to take her hand. "Sarah, you're doing amazing things here. But you're only human. You can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself too." Sarah looked at him, her heart full of emotion. "I know. I've just been so focused on everything outside of me that I forgot to focus on myself. On us." Grant smiled, his thumb brushing over her hand. "Well, you're not alone anymore. We'll figure it out together. But don't forget, you're allowed to take a break, too. You deserve it." Sarah nodded slowly, his words sinking in. She had been so used to giving to others, always putting her patients, her work, and her mission first. But now, with Grant's support, she realized that it was okay to step back sometimes. It was okay to prioritize herself. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling the weight on her shoulders lift just a little. "I needed to hear that." As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself taking small steps to find balance. She began scheduling time for herself, time to unwind, and most importantly, time to enjoy the relationship she had built with Grant. They took long walks together, spent evenings cooking dinner, and even took weekend trips to explore new places. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she was living fully, not just for others, but for herself as well. As they sat on the couch together one evening, Grant turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "I was thinking," he said, "we've come a long way, haven't we? From where we started to where we are now. It's incredible." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It really is. I never imagined I'd be here. I never imagined we'd be here." Grant reached for her hand, his expression serious but filled with love. "You know, I've always believed in you. From the very beginning. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Sarah. And now, I can see it. You're not just changing the world. You're changing your life, too." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "I never thought I could have both," she said softly. "I thought I'd always have to choose, between my career and love, between helping others and taking care of myself. But now, with you, I realize I don't have to choose." Grant leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't. You can have it all, Sarah. And I'm here to help you build it." Sarah felt a rush of warmth at his words. They had come so far. Their love had been tested, but it had only grown stronger with time. They had built something real, something that wasn't just about passion, but about trust, support, and understanding. It was a partnership. And with that partnership, Sarah felt more confident than ever. She could help others, she could build her dreams, and she could love. She could have it all. "I think I'm ready for the next step," Sarah said, her voice filled with certainty. "For both of us." Grant smiled, his eyes full of pride. "Me too, Sarah. I'm ready for whatever comes next." Together, as they sat there, hand in hand, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. She had found her balance. And with Grant by her side, she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, stronger than ever. "I think we're finally getting there," Sarah said, her voice filled with satisfaction as she sat down across from Grant at their favorite cafe. They had just wrapped up a productive day at the clinic, and although it had been a long and demanding journey, the future was finally beginning to take shape. Grant smiled, his eyes full of warmth. "I know we've worked hard to get here, but I have to say, I'm really proud of you, Sarah. You've built something incredible. And now, we get to enjoy the fruits of that labor." Sarah chuckled softly, feeling a wave of gratitude for the man who had been by her side through every step of this adventure. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grant. You've been my rock, always supporting me, no matter what." Grant reached out to take her hand, his grip strong and reassuring. "We're a team," he said, his voice steady and confident. "And I've always believed in you. You've shown me that anything is possible if you're willing to put in the effort. I'm proud to be part of this journey with you." The weight of his words settled in Sarah's chest. She had never imagined she'd be here, in this place where everything she'd worked for was finally coming to fruition. The clinic was thriving, her work was making a difference, and she had found love in the process. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was the life she had built, and it was more fulfilling than anything she had ever imagined. But as Sarah looked at the bustling cafe around them, she couldn't shake the thought that there was still so much left to do. She had come a long way, but there were always more patients to help, more dreams to pursue, and more obstacles to overcome. And now, as she and Grant talked about their next steps, she realized that the journey wasn't just about the clinic. It was about their shared future. "Grant," she said, her voice growing more serious, "I've been thinking a lot lately about what comes next. We've built this incredible clinic, but I want to keep growing. I want to make a bigger impact. I want to expand the clinic, maybe even turn it into something that can help even more people." Grant's eyes lit up with excitement as he listened to her. "That sounds amazing, Sarah," he said, his tone filled with enthusiasm. "You've got the vision, and I know you have the determination to make it happen. I'll be right there with you, every step of the way." Sarah felt a surge of energy at his words. This was what she had always wanted. More than just a job, more than just a relationship. It was a partnership, a life built on shared dreams and mutual support. Together, they could accomplish anything. But there was something else Sarah had been thinking about, something that had been lingering in the back of her mind. It was a bigger question, one that she hadn't fully confronted yet. "There's something I need to ask you," she said, her voice suddenly quiet. Grant tilted his head, his expression curious. "What is it, Sarah?" She took a deep breath, unsure how to phrase it. "I've been so focused on everything we've built together, the clinic, our lives, everything, that I haven't really thought about what this means for us. For our future. I want to know where we're going. I want to know what this looks like in the long term." Grant's gaze softened as he listened to her. He leaned forward, his hands resting gently on the table. "I get it," he said quietly. "We've been so caught up in the day-to-day, in the excitement of everything happening so fast, that we haven't really taken the time to think about the long term. But I'm here for the long haul, Sarah. I want this to be something lasting, something we build together. And I'm ready to take that next step with you." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been nervous about asking the question, afraid of what the answer might be. But hearing him speak so confidently, so lovingly, made her heart swell. "I'm ready too," she said, her voice steady. "I think we've both worked so hard to get here, and now it's time to start thinking about the future. What do we want it to look like? What do we want to create together?" Grant smiled, his eyes filled with affection. "I think we've already created something beautiful. But there's so much more we can do. We can expand the clinic, travel, help more people, and take time for ourselves too. We can make a life that's full of meaning, full of love, and full of possibility." Sarah felt a rush of excitement at his words. She had always been someone who lived for the moment, focused on the present and on making the most of her time. But now, with Grant, she could see a future unfolding, a future filled with potential, filled with love, and filled with a shared vision. "I can't wait to see what we can do next," Sarah said, her voice full of hope. "Whatever it is, we'll do it together." Grant nodded, his smile widening. "Together," he echoed. As they sat there, hand in hand, Sarah knew that the future was wide open for them. They had already faced so many challenges, and together, they had overcome them all. And now, with a shared vision for the future, they were ready to take on whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt at peace, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as partners. The future was theirs to build, and with Grant by her side, she knew there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. The next few months were filled with new challenges and triumphs for both Sarah and Grant. The clinic had expanded beyond their wildest dreams, with more patients than ever relying on the services they provided. Sarah was busier than ever, but the joy of seeing her vision come to life kept her motivated. As the clinic flourished, so did her relationship with Grant. They had found a rhythm, a balance between their personal and professional lives. Sarah could no longer imagine a life without him, and she was beginning to understand just how deeply they had become intertwined. One evening, after a long day of meetings and patient consultations, Sarah and Grant found themselves sitting on the couch together, unwinding in the peaceful quiet of their apartment. The soft glow of the table lamp cast a warm light on the room, creating a cozy atmosphere as Sarah leaned against Grant's shoulder. "You know," Sarah said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never imagined it would be like this. I didn't know what I was getting into when I started this whole thing, building the clinic, managing everything. But I'm so glad I did. I can't believe how much we've accomplished." Grant smiled, his arm wrapping around her as he kissed the top of her head. "I'm proud of you, Sarah. You've created something amazing, and I've been lucky enough to be by your side through all of it." She smiled up at him, her heart swelling with affection. "You've been more than just by my side, Grant. You've been there through everything, supporting me, encouraging me when I needed it most. I don't think I could have done this without you." Grant looked at her with a gentle expression, his eyes filled with admiration. "You've always been capable of doing this on your own, Sarah. I just helped you see that. And now look at what you've built. It's incredible." As Sarah gazed into his eyes, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word. They had both worked so hard to get to this point, and now they were sharing a life together, one built on love, trust, and mutual respect. "I think it's time," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with thoughtfulness. Grant turned to her, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "Time for what?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Sarah took a deep breath before continuing. "Time to take things to the next level. We've built this clinic, we've built our relationship, but I think it's time for us to start thinking about the future in a bigger way. I want us to start thinking about a family, Grant." The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah could feel her heart race as she awaited his response. She had been thinking about this for some time now. She was ready to take the next step, to build a family with Grant, to share her life with him in every possible way. Grant looked at her, his eyes filled with love and understanding. "Sarah," he said softly, "I've thought about this too. I've always known that I wanted to have a family, but I wanted to make sure that we were both on the same page, that we were ready for this big step together." Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had been nervous about bringing it up, afraid that it might not be the right time or that Grant wasn't ready. But hearing him speak so openly about it filled her with confidence. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady now. "I want us to start this next chapter of our lives together." Grant squeezed her hand, his face lighting up with a smile that melted her heart. "I'm more than ready," he replied, his voice full of warmth. "We've built something beautiful already, and I know we can make this next step just as amazing." As they sat there together, holding hands, Sarah felt a sense of excitement begin to build inside her. The future they had imagined was finally within reach. She was ready to take the plunge, to start a family with the man she loved, and to continue building a life full of meaning and purpose. There was no doubt in her mind that this was the right path forward. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Grant began to talk more seriously about their future. They discussed everything from the practicalities of starting a family to the hopes and dreams they shared for the next chapter of their lives. Sarah continued to run the clinic, and Grant was there every step of the way, helping in any way he could. They both found a new sense of balance in their lives, one that allowed them to prioritize each other, their careers, and the dreams they shared for the future. They began taking steps toward expanding their family, exploring the idea of adoption and what it would mean for them as a couple. As Sarah watched the clinic continue to thrive, she felt a deep sense of pride in what they had accomplished. It was no longer just about her work. It was about their life together, the family they were building, and the future they were creating. "I'm so proud of us," Sarah said one night as she and Grant sat together on their balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Look at everything we've done, everything we've built. And now, we're ready for the next chapter. A family. It's incredible." Grant smiled, pulling her close. "It is incredible. And I'm ready for it all, Sarah. I'm ready for everything we're going to build together." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the weight of their journey and the excitement of what lay ahead. The future was uncertain, but with Grant by her side, she knew that they could handle anything that came their way. Together, they had already built a life worth living, and now, they were ready to build a family to share it with. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a sense of peace. The road ahead was long, but she knew it was the right road. They were ready for whatever the future held, as long as they faced it together. Months had passed since they made the decision to take the next step, and with every day that passed, Sarah felt more certain that they were on the right path. The clinic continued to thrive, and her dream of making healthcare accessible to everyone was taking shape in ways she had never imagined. It was no longer just about helping patients. It was about creating a legacy, a future that was bigger than herself. The love between her and Grant had only deepened. They had faced challenges, yes, but each obstacle had only brought them closer. And now, as they stood on the cusp of building their family, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the life they had built together. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, the glow of the television flickering softly in the background, Sarah turned to Grant, her heart full of thoughts and feelings. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with wonder. Grant smiled, his arm around her as he pulled her close. "All the time," he said, his voice steady. "We've come a long way, haven't we? From when we first met, when you were taking care of me in that hospital bed, to now, running a thriving clinic together. And the best part is, we're doing it side by side." Sarah nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. "I never imagined it would be like this. I never thought I'd have this kind of life. A career I love, a family I'm about to start. I feel like everything is falling into place." Grant kissed her forehead gently, his love for her shining in his eyes. "You've worked hard for everything you have, Sarah. You've earned it. And now we get to build this together, just like we always dreamed." The thought of their shared dreams, the future they were creating together, filled Sarah with a sense of hope. But with that hope came new questions. The excitement of expanding their family was growing. But there was still a part of her that wondered if she was truly ready for all the changes ahead. "There's something I've been thinking about," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "We've been so focused on building our lives, our careers, and now, we're getting ready to start a family. But I'm starting to wonder if we're really prepared for all that it entails." Grant looked at her with a mix of understanding and curiosity. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I mean," Sarah began, her voice thoughtful, "having a family is a huge step. It's not just about what we can give to others, but also about what we need to give to ourselves. I want to be the best partner I can be to you, and I want to be the best parent I can be. But I'm realizing that it's not just about making sure the clinic runs smoothly or that we're financially secure. It's about finding balance and making sure we have the time and space for each other, for ourselves, and for the family we want to create." Grant nodded, his expression serious. "I understand what you're saying," he said, squeezing her hand. "I think we've both been so focused on our work, on the clinic, that we haven't fully stopped to think about how much this next chapter will change things. But I think we're ready for it. We have the foundation, and we have each other." Sarah smiled at his words. She had always been a planner, a doer, and she knew that their journey ahead wouldn't always be easy. But she also knew that they had built something strong, a partnership, a love, and a shared vision for their future. It was that foundation that would guide them through whatever came next. As the weeks went by, Sarah and Grant continued to navigate the delicate balance of work, family, and their own personal dreams. The clinic was still growing, and every day they saw more patients walk through the doors, more lives touched by the care they were providing. But at home, they made sure to take time for each other. They cooked dinner together, took evening walks, and talked about their hopes for the future. Sarah began to realize that, while her career and their shared mission were incredibly important, it was the moments they shared together, those quiet, peaceful moments, that truly made their life complete. One night, as they lay in bed, Sarah turned to Grant, her heart filled with love and anticipation. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice soft. "I think we're ready to take that next step. With everything we've been talking about, I feel like we're ready to expand our family, to take this leap into parenthood." Grant looked at her, his face glowing with excitement. "I'm ready, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with warmth and certainty. "We've built so much together, and I know that we're ready for this next chapter. We've faced so many challenges, and we've always come out stronger. I know we can do this." Sarah felt a rush of relief and joy at his words. The doubt that had been lingering in her heart faded away, replaced by the certainty that they were ready for this next chapter. They had already built something beautiful together, a life filled with love, purpose, and shared dreams. Now, they were ready to take on the challenge of building a family. "I'm so glad we're on the same page," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Grant kissed her gently, his lips brushing against hers as he whispered, "Together, Sarah. We're in this together, every step of the way." As they lay together, their hands intertwined, Sarah felt a deep sense of contentment settle in her chest. The journey ahead would undoubtedly bring challenges, but with Grant by her side, she knew they would face it together. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a peace that came from knowing that whatever the future held, they were ready to take it on, together. The decision had been made, and Sarah felt a sense of calm wash over her. She and Grant had spent the last few months preparing for the next chapter, both personally and professionally. The clinic continued to grow, and as it did, so did their plans for the family they were about to start. Sarah had spent so much time working on the clinic, on building something meaningful for the community, that she hadn't allowed herself to fully embrace the thought of becoming a parent. But now, with the clinic in a good place, and with Grant by her side, she was ready. As the days passed, Sarah and Grant found themselves spending more time talking about their future, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, what kind of life they wanted to build for their children. There were so many unknowns, so many things to consider, but one thing was certain: they were in this together. One evening, after dinner, they sat on the couch, the soft light of the living room creating a warm, intimate atmosphere. Sarah rested her head on Grant's shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't realized she was missing. "I keep thinking about the life we're about to create," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "It feels so surreal, but also so right. We've worked so hard to get here, and now we're ready to take on the biggest challenge of all." Grant looked down at her, his hand resting gently on hers. "We've always been ready, Sarah. We've built this life together, and we've made sure that we're strong enough for what's to come. I believe in us, in what we can do together." Sarah smiled up at him, feeling the depth of his love and support. She had always been so focused on giving, on helping others, that she had neglected to think about what it would take to nurture and care for her own family. But now, with Grant beside her, she knew they could do this. "I know we've talked about it a lot," Sarah said, her voice soft but steady, "but I've been thinking about the kind of parents we'll be, what values we want to pass on. We both come from different backgrounds, and I think that will make us stronger, but I want to make sure we're on the same page when it comes to what we want for our children." Grant nodded, his expression serious. "I think about that too," he said quietly. "We both want the same thing, a loving, supportive home. But I also want our children to know the value of hard work, of helping others, of caring for the world around them. I think we'll make a great team when it comes to raising them." Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude as she listened to him. She had always admired Grant's outlook on life, his ability to see the best in people, and the way he approached everything with such care and consideration. She knew that their children would be lucky to have him as a father. "I want that too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I want them to know that they can be anything they want to be, that they can help change the world, just like we're trying to do. I want them to know the importance of kindness and compassion, and that family always comes first." The conversation drifted into quiet reflection as they imagined the future they were building. Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement, mixed with a bit of nervousness, but mostly, there was peace. She had found something real, something worth fighting for, and now they were preparing to share it with the next generation. As the evening wore on, Sarah and Grant continued to talk about their dreams for the future, where they wanted to live, what kind of life they wanted to give their children. There was so much to consider, but it didn't feel overwhelming. With every conversation, they seemed to grow closer, more connected. It was as though everything they had worked for, everything they had built, was leading them to this moment. "I think we're ready for this, Sarah," Grant said, his voice full of confidence. "We've already proven that we can face anything together. And now we're ready to take this next step. Parenthood. It won't be easy, but I know we can handle it." Sarah looked at him, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. She had never imagined that this would be her life, that she would have a career she loved, a family she was about to build, and a partner who was so fully committed to their shared future. "I'm ready too," she said softly, her voice full of certainty. "I know it won't always be easy, but with you by my side, I feel like we can do anything. I think we've created something beautiful, and now we get to share it with the world." Grant smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. Together, we've already made something incredible. And now, we'll make even more. Sarah couldn't help but smile back. The future was still uncertain in so many ways, but with Grant beside her, she knew they would face it with strength, with love, and with the unwavering belief that they were meant to walk this path together. They were ready for the next chapter. They were ready for parenthood. And whatever challenges they would face them as a team. The weeks leading up to the birth of their first child were a whirlwind of excitement and preparation. Sarah and Grant had worked tirelessly to get everything ready, from setting up the nursery to making sure the clinic was running smoothly, while they both took time off to focus on their growing family. Sarah found herself caught between the thrilling anticipation of becoming a parent and the reality of how much change it would bring. But through it all, she felt a sense of calm knowing that she wasn't doing this alone. Grant was right by her side, every step of the way. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Sarah felt the weight of the moment. She was 9 months pregnant, and every little movement from their child inside her reminded her that their lives were about to change forever. She leaned against Grant, feeling his strong arm around her. "Can you believe it's almost time?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "It feels like just yesterday we were talking about this day, and now, it's right around the corner." Grant smiled, his eyes warm and full of pride. "I know. It's amazing how fast time has gone by. But I know we're ready for this. I see how much love you've already put into this family, Sarah. You're going to be an incredible mom." Sarah felt a swell of emotion at his words. It wasn't that she didn't believe in herself, but there was something so powerful about having his support, his faith in her, that made everything feel right. "I hope I am," she said softly. "I want to give our child everything. Love, stability, everything I didn't have growing up." Grant's hand rested on her belly, and he kissed the top of her head. "You will. You already are. Just look at everything we've built together. And now we're going to create a life filled with even more love, more memories." The words were simple, but they meant everything to Sarah. She had spent so much of her life focusing on others, trying to fix what was broken in the world, that she had forgotten what it meant to let someone truly care for her in return. And now, with Grant, she had found that, and so much more. "I've never felt more ready for anything in my life," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "We've created something incredible together, and now we're about to take this next step. I'm ready to meet our baby, ready to start this new chapter of our lives." Grant smiled, his eyes soft and full of emotion. "And I'm right here with you, Sarah. Through it all, we've got this." As the days passed, the anticipation grew. Sarah was both nervous and excited, but with every passing moment, the nervousness faded a little more, replaced by the feeling that they had truly built something worth fighting for. The clinic was thriving, their relationship was stronger than ever, and they were preparing to bring a new life into the world. But there were still moments of doubt, moments when Sarah wondered if she was truly ready for everything that parenthood would bring. One evening, after a particularly long day at the clinic, Sarah found herself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The baby was kicking again, a small reminder of the life that was about to join them. Grant turned to her, sensing that something was on her mind. "You okay?" he asked softly. Sarah turned to him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I'm just thinking about everything," she said quietly. "About how much things are going to change. I know we're ready, but it's still overwhelming sometimes. I want to be the best mom I can be, but I also want to make sure I don't lose myself in the process. I don't want to forget who I am outside of being a mother." Grant reached over and took her hand, his voice filled with reassurance. "You won't lose yourself, Sarah. You've always been strong, and you'll always be you. And you're not alone in this. We're in this together. We'll figure it out, just like we always have." His words calmed her, and for the first time in a while, she felt the peace she had been searching for. She had spent so much of her life being afraid of change, of losing herself in the roles she had to play. But now, with Grant by her side, she realized that change didn't have to mean losing who she was. It meant evolving, growing, and embracing a new chapter in their lives. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Grant smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You'll never have to find out. We've built something strong, Sarah, and together, we can handle anything that comes our way." The next day, Sarah woke up feeling more at peace than she had in weeks. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but she was no longer afraid. She had a partner who supported her, a career she was passionate about, and a family that was about to grow. With Grant by her side, she felt ready for whatever came next. As the day went on, they finalized everything for the baby's arrival. Sarah's nerves were now replaced with excitement. They had done everything they could to prepare, and now, all they had to do was wait. That night, as they sat together in the quiet of their home, Sarah turned to Grant, a smile on her face. "I think we're ready," she said, her voice full of confidence. "We've worked so hard, and now, we're about to meet our baby. This is the next step in our journey, and I can't wait." Grant kissed her forehead, his smile wide. "We've got this, Sarah. Together, we've already created something amazing. And now, we're going to make it even better." Sarah felt a rush of love and gratitude. She knew that the next chapter was just beginning, and she was ready. With Grant, she had everything she needed to face the future, and she knew that no matter what happened, they would face it together. Their love, their dreams, and their family were all tied together in a way that was stronger than anything they had imagined. They were ready for this, ready to take on the world together. The day had arrived. Sarah's heart raced with anticipation as she stood beside Grant, both of them ready to welcome their baby into the world. They had spent months preparing, and now, all of that preparation was culminating in this one incredible moment. Sarah had been nervous for weeks, but as she sat in the hospital room, the anxiety melted away. She had Grant by her side, his steady presence grounding her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. The journey they had taken together had led them here, and now they were ready to take this final step into parenthood. "Are you okay?" Grant asked, his voice soft, his hand holding hers tightly. Sarah smiled at him, feeling the strength of his love and support. "I'm nervous, but I'm ready. I think we both are." He nodded, his eyes filled with admiration. "You're incredible, Sarah. We've come so far, and now we get to start this new chapter of our lives. We're going to be parents. I can't wait." The excitement in his voice made Sarah's heart swell. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced before, this overwhelming sense of love and possibility. The room was quiet except for the soft sounds of the monitors, the beeping of the machines that kept track of her progress. But to Sarah, it felt like the world had stopped, leaving only her and Grant in that sacred moment. "I can't believe this day is here," she whispered. "It feels like we've been waiting for so long, and now, it's happening." Grant squeezed her hand. "It's happening because we're ready for it. We've built this together. Our love, our clinic, everything that's come before this moment, it's all been leading to this." The words settled in Sarah's heart like a promise. They had built a life together, a life that was now ready to expand in ways they had dreamed about for so long. Their love had created a solid foundation, and now it would grow with their child. She looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. "Thank you for being here with me. For everything. I never would have been able to do this without you." Grant smiled, his eyes shining. "We've always been a team, Sarah. I'm just happy to be here with you, every step of the way. And I always will be." As the nurses prepared the room for delivery, Sarah felt a wave of excitement and nervousness flood through her. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment when their baby would finally be in their arms. And although Sarah knew the road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, she also knew that she wasn't alone. With Grant beside her, she was ready for whatever came next. Time seemed to stretch as the hours passed, but when the moment finally came, everything fell into place. Sarah's breathing quickened as the contractions grew stronger, and Grant was there with her, holding her hand, whispering words of encouragement. He was her rock, her steady presence in the whirlwind of emotions. As the pain intensified, Sarah focused on Grant's voice, his words grounding her. "You're doing amazing," he said, his voice filled with pride. "We're almost there, Sarah. Just a little more. You're incredible." Sarah squeezed his hand, the intensity of the moment overwhelming her. "I can't do this without you," she said, her voice shaking with exhaustion and fear. "Yes, you can," Grant replied firmly, his voice unwavering. "We're doing this together. You've got this." And with his words, Sarah found the strength to push through, her body responding to the wave of contractions. It wasn't easy, but as the minutes passed, she could feel the end of the journey drawing closer. The room was filled with the sound of her breathing and the encouraging words of the medical team. Finally, After what felt like an eternity, the cry of their newborn baby echoed through the room. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she looked up at Grant, tears streaming down her face. He was smiling, his eyes full of awe and wonder. "We did it," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. The doctor placed their baby in Sarah's arms, and for the first time, Sarah felt the full weight of what they had created. Their child, their family. It was real. "It's a boy," the nurse said, her voice filled with warmth as she handed them the newborn. Sarah looked down at their son, a mixture of emotions flooding through her. He was tiny, perfect, and everything they had ever hoped for. "He's beautiful," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "He's ours." Grant nodded, his eyes never leaving their son. "He's perfect, Sarah. And he's going to be surrounded by love, just like we've always dreamed." As Sarah held their son in her arms, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the life she had built with Grant. They had faced challenges, but together, they had overcome them. And now, they were starting something new, a family. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities. And Sarah knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. They were ready. Together, they were ready to be parents. They were ready to give their child a life filled with love, support, and all the possibilities the world had to offer. This was just the beginning of their next chapter, and as Sarah looked at Grant, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with the same strength and love that had gotten them to this point. The months following the birth of their son passed in a blur of joy, exhaustion, and discovery. Sarah and Grant had found a new rhythm to their lives, one that revolved around their family. They had worked so hard to build a life together, and now, with the arrival of their baby, they were creating a new chapter. Sarah often found herself amazed by how much love they had for their son, how this tiny human had brought them even closer. The clinic was still thriving, but it wasn't just about work anymore. It was about their son, their family, and the life they were building together. Every day brought new challenges, new moments to treasure, new lessons to learn. But Sarah knew that they could handle anything, as long as they were together. One evening, as they sat on the couch with their son nestled between them, Sarah looked at Grant with a sense of contentment she had never known before. "Can you believe we're parents now?" she asked softly, her voice filled with wonder. Grant smiled, his arm around her as he gazed down at their son, who was peacefully asleep in his lap. "I can't believe how fast it's all happened," he said, his voice full of pride. "But when I look at him, I know this is exactly where we were always meant to be." Sarah's heart swelled as she watched Grant gently stroke their son's hair. She had always known that she wanted a family, but she had never imagined how much this moment would change her, how much it would deepen her love for Grant and the life they had built together. "I'm so grateful for you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything you've done for us. You've been the best partner, and now you're going to be the best dad." Grant looked up at her, his expression soft with love. "We've done this together, Sarah, and we'll continue doing it together every step of the way. Our family is everything, and I'll always be here for you and for him." The words filled her with a sense of peace and certainty. She had always been so focused on giving, on helping others, on doing everything for everyone else. But now, she realized that she didn't have to sacrifice her own happiness to build a family. They had done it together, and they would continue to do so, each day stronger than before. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and Grant continued to find new ways to balance their work, their family, and their dreams. They took turns caring for their son, with Grant often stepping in so that Sarah could take a break and focus on the clinic. They had always worked as a team, but now, they were learning how to work even more seamlessly, how to be parents while still holding on to their dreams and ambitions. And as their son grew, so did their love. They found themselves taking moments to pause, to reflect, and to savor the small, quiet moments together. They celebrated every milestone, his first smile, his first words, his first steps, and with each new chapter, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of pride in the family they had created. But even as they celebrated, there were moments when Sarah would find herself reflecting on how far they had come, how much they had overcome, and how much they still had to learn. She knew that parenthood wouldn't always be easy, that there would be struggles ahead, but with Grant by her side, she knew that they could handle anything. They had already faced so much together, and had come out stronger for it. Together, they had built something beautiful. "I think about everything we've been through," Sarah said one evening, as she and Grant sat in their backyard, watching the sunset. "How we started with nothing but a dream, and now we have this. A family. A life. It's more than I ever thought possible." Grant took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "We've built something real, Sarah, and I wouldn't change a thing. We've worked hard, but we've built it on love, trust, and teamwork. And now we have a future that's filled with possibilities." Sarah smiled, feeling the warmth of his words settle in her heart. "I've learned so much from you," she said softly. "You've taught me how to believe in myself, how to dream bigger, and how to never give up. I don't know what I would do without you." Grant's smile grew wider as he leaned in to kiss her. "You don't have to ever find out," he said, his voice full of affection. "We're in this together, and I'll always be here." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling a rush of love for the man beside her. She had spent so many years trying to control everything, trying to make sure everything was perfect. But with Grant, she had learned to let go, to trust, and to embrace the unpredictable beauty of life. And now, as she looked at their son, the life they had built together, and the future ahead, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had found everything she had ever dreamed of, and more. The next chapter of their journey had already begun, and Sarah knew that, no matter what challenges they would face them together. As a family, Sarah and Grant had created something truly special, a love that had only grown stronger with time, a partnership that had weathered every storm, and a family that was just beginning. And as they looked to the future, they knew that the best was yet to come. Discover the inspiring journey of love, resilience, and success in these millionaire stories. Follow the heartfelt narrative of Sarah and Grant as they navigate life's challenges, from building a thriving clinic to embracing parenthood together. Their journey shows the power of determination, love, and unwavering support. Through highs and lows, Sarah and Grant prove that with the right partner, anything is possible. As they face the challenges of running a business and expanding their family, their story is a testament to the strength of their bond. From humble beginnings to achieving their dreams, these millionaire stories highlight the true meaning of success, balancing work, love, and family. This is more than just a tale of financial prosperity. It's about the real, heartfelt moments that shape a lifetime. As Sarah and Grant move forward, they inspire others to never give up on their dreams, no matter the obstacles. This collection of millionaire stories illustrates that success is about much more than wealth. It's about the relationships, the family, and the journey that matter most. Explore how Sarah and Grant's shared commitment and resilience lead them to not only build a business, but to build a family, showing that with love and support, anything is achievable. This is a story for anyone who believes in the power of love, hard work, and the dream of creating something meaningful in life. Their millionaire stories continue to inspire, reminding us all that the most valuable successes are the ones shared with those we love.